I never imagined that a single moment could shatter a carefully crafted facade. My name is Olivia, and I've spent years trying to live up to the expectations of my family. On the outside, I was the perfect daughter, the one who pursued a demanding career in medicine, while my younger sister, Grace, followed her dreams of becoming a wedding planner. But beneath the surface, I was a tightly wound spring, ready to unravel at any moment. Little did I know that my unraveling would begin at Grace's wedding, a day meant for celebration, not confrontation. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my tailored dress, I could feel the familiar knot tightening in my stomach. The laughter and chatter from the other bridesmaids filtered through the door, and a wave of anxiety washed over me. Everyone was excited about the upcoming ceremony, yet all I could think about was the inevitable comparison. I was a successful doctor in a prestigious hospital, yet here I was, feeling like the black sheep of the family. My parents had spent years praising Grace's artistic abilities and her knack for planning every detail of this extravagant wedding, while my accomplishments were often overshadowed by their expectations for me to maintain a certain image. Walking down the aisle to take my place among the other guests, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being judged at every turn. "Look at Olivia, the doctor," I imagined them whispering. "Why isn't she married yet?" The pressure felt overwhelming, and as the ceremony began, I focused on Grace and her soon-to-be husband Ethan, hoping to drown out my insecurities with their happiness. But when I caught a glimpse of my parents in the front row, their faces were a mix of pride and something else, disappointment perhaps. I couldn't help but wonder, has anyone else ever felt like they're never good enough for their family? Let me know below. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and laughter, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. After the I-dos, the reception kicked off with an energy that was almost infectious. The dance floor filled up quickly, and for a moment, I allowed myself to be swept up in the joy around me. But the moment I took a break at the bar, I overheard my parents talking. "Isn't it nice that Grace has found someone so wonderful?" my mother said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt insincere to me. "Olivia should take notes. She should be more like Grace." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to see my father nodding in agreement, a look of approval on his face that felt like a dagger. I had dedicated years of my life to save lives, to work long hours in the hospital, yet here I was, being reduced to a comparison with my sister. I felt my cheeks flush as I fought back tears. I was tired of being the one who felt the need to prove myself constantly. As the night went on, I tried to mask my discomfort with polite smiles and forced laughter, but every time I glanced at my parents, the weight of their expectations grew heavier. It was as if I was an outsider at my own family gathering, trapped in a narrative where I could never win. It wasn't until the speeches began that I truly felt the ground shift beneath me. Ethan, the groom, stood up and thanked everyone for coming. His words were warm and genuine, and I could see the adoration in Grace's eyes. But then, he turned his gaze toward me, and I felt the room shift. "I want to take a moment to thank someone very special," he said, his voice steady. "Olivia, you probably don't know this, but a few years ago, I was in a really dark place. I had a serious health scare, and it was your quick thinking and expertise that saved my life." For a moment, time stopped. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel all eyes on me. I could sense the surprise in the room, especially from my parents. I had been doing my job, just like I had always done, but now it felt like the spotlight was shining directly on me, illuminating everything I had worked so hard for. "Thank you, Olivia," Ethan continued, "for being the incredible doctor you are. I owe you everything." The applause erupted, and I felt a strange mix of pride and embarrassment wash over me. My parents looked stunned, their mouths agape in disbelief. and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of validation. But just as quickly, my triumph was overshadowed by the familiar whisper of doubt. I could see my mother's expression change from shock to something more calculating. Maybe this is the wake-up call she needs. I could almost hear her thinking. It was a stark reminder that no matter how much I achieved, I was still stuck in the role of the underachiever in their eyes. As the night continued and the laughter echoed around me, I couldn't shake that feeling of being on the edge of something. I had spent so much time trying to earn their approval, but maybe it was time to stop seeking validation from those who didn't understand my journey. I wanted to believe that Ethan's words had changed the narrative, but deep down, I knew the battle for my own self-worth had just begun. Would I ever be able to stand up to my parents and show them who I really was? Or would I always be defined by their expectations? The questions swirled in my mind like a restless wind, and as I took a deep breath, I felt a determination starting to rise within me. The night was far from over, and I was about to discover just how powerful my voice could be. As the reception wore on, I found myself drifting through the crowd, my mind still tangled in thoughts of my family and their perceptions. The music swelled around me, couples twirling on the dance floor, laughter mingling with clinking glasses. I wanted to immerse myself in the joy of the evening, but I felt like I was encased in glass, watching everything from the outside. My sister, the stunning bride, radiated happiness as she danced with her new husband. In that moment, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of envy. How easy it seemed for her to be the center of attention, to bask in the glow of everyone's admiration, while I stood on the periphery, a mere shadow of the person I wanted to be. While I tried to shake off the feeling, I noticed Ethan making his way toward me, his smile warm and inviting. He had been the one bright spot in my otherwise tumultuous evening. "Hey, Dr. Helena," he said, with a teasing lilt in his voice. "Are you ready to hit the dance floor? Or are you going to keep lurking in the shadows?" I couldn't help but laugh. "I'm not lurking, just observing," I replied, attempting to deflect the truth. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Come on, you should join us. It's a celebration." With a reluctant nod, I followed him to the dance floor, where the beat pulsed through the air, urging my feet to move. As I swayed to the rhythm, I felt a flicker of freedom, a release from the weight of my insecurities. For that brief moment, I was just Helena, not the underachiever or the disappointment. I let the music wash over me, losing myself in the vibrant atmosphere. But then, as if on cue, the familiar voices of my parents cut through the euphoria like a cold wind. "Look at her out there, trying so hard," my mother whispered to my father, her tone dripping with condescension. "Why can't she be more like her sister? At least someone is making something of themselves." The sting of her words pierced me, and I felt the joy I had found evaporate into thin air. I tried to shake off the hurt, but it lingered like a ghost, haunting me as I danced. I caught Ethan's eye across the floor, and he must have sensed my shift in energy. He approached me again, concern etched on his face. "You okay?" he asked softly, the loud music making it difficult to hear. "Yeah, just family stuff," I replied, trying to brush it off. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. "You know, it's your sister's big day. Don't let them get to you. You're doing amazing things. You should celebrate that." "Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it," I murmured, grateful for his support. But as the night wore on, the feeling of inadequacy continued to gnaw at me. I couldn't help but compare myself to my sister, who was effortlessly gliding through life, while I struggled to find my footing. The evening began to blur, a mix of laughter, speeches, and heartfelt toasts. I smiled and clapped along, but the internal dialogue was relentless. I had spent years pouring myself into my studies, my career, yet here I was, still feeling like the black sheep. It wasn't that I didn't love my sister. It was just hard to ignore the stark contrast between our lives. Eventually, I found myself at the bar, seeking solace in a glass of sparkling water. I stared at my reflection in the mirror behind the bar, searching for something, maybe a hint of the confidence I wished I had. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked weary, burdened by expectations and the weight of disappointment. As I stood there, lost in thought, I overheard snippets of conversation from the guests around me, laughter and joy surrounding me like a comforting blanket. But then I heard something that made my heart skip a beat. Did you hear about the story of the groom and the doctor? Apparently she saved his life or something. A woman said, her voice bright and animated. My ears perked up, and I strained to listen. Yes, I heard he was in a really bad accident last year. She was working the night shift at the hospital and was the one who stabilized him. Can you believe it? The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't realize they were talking about me. I had performed a routine surgery on a young man who had suffered severe injuries in a motorcycle accident, but hearing it recounted like this made it feel surreal. I never expected my work to be discussed in such a light-hearted manner, as if I were some kind of hero. Just then, the groom himself, Brian, appeared at my side. Helena, I've been looking for you, he said, his face beaming with gratitude. I just wanted to thank you again for everything you did for me. I wouldn't be here today without you. I felt my cheeks flush as I brushed it off. It was my job, really. I'm just glad you're okay, I replied, but he shook his head, his sincerity cutting through my reservations. No, you don't understand. I owe you my life, and now I get to marry the love of my life because you were there that night. I can never thank you enough for what you did. At that moment, the weight of my parents' judgment faded, replaced by something much more profound. Here was someone I had helped. Someone whose life I had impacted in a way that far outweighed any superficial expectations my family held. It was a reminder that my worth wasn't determined by their opinions, but by the lives I touched and the difference I made. I managed a genuine smile, realizing that this was my moment to embrace who I was. You're welcome, Brian. I'm just glad to see you happy, I said, and for the first time that night, I felt a sense of belonging. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream. As I danced and mingled, I was no longer just the doctor or the underachiever. I was Helena, a woman who had made an impact, even if my family couldn't see it. And as the last song played, I knew that this night was just the beginning of a journey toward accepting myself for who I truly was. The echoes of laughter and the melodies of the band floated around me, wrapping me in warmth. I watched as Brian and my sister shared a slow dance, their eyes locked in a world only they could see. It was beautiful, a celebration of love that seemed to banish all shadows. For a moment, I allowed myself to forget the critical voices that often filled my mind. I was in a space where my professional life intertwined with personal joy, where I could be proud of the woman I had become. But as the night wore on, those familiar feelings of doubt began to creep back in. My parents had spent the evening whispering to each other, casting sidelong glances in my direction. I could almost hear their thoughts. Why isn't she married? Why isn't she more successful? The pressure was palpable, and though I had fought against their judgments for so long, their expectations still clung to me like an unwanted shadow. I stepped outside onto the balcony, seeking solace in the cool night air. The garden was illuminated by twinkling fairy lights, and the stars shone brightly overhead. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of blooming jasmine, trying to ground myself. Just then, my sister Emily stepped out, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "Helena, look at you!" she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around me. "You're glowing." "Thanks, Em. It's hard not to, with how beautiful everything is tonight," I replied, pulling back slightly to look at her. She was radiating joy, and it made my heart swell. "You look incredible, by the way." "Thank you. I can't believe I'm finally married," she said, her eyes sparkling. "It feels surreal." We stood there for a moment, just soaking in the magic of the night. "How's it going inside?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation away from the doubts swirling in my mind. "Honestly, everyone is having a blast. Brian's parents are a riot." She giggled. Then her expression turned more serious. "But hell, I've noticed Mom and Dad seem a bit off. They've barely spoken to you." "Yeah, well, what's new?" I shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "You know how they are." Emily's brow furrowed. "I don't want them to bring you down tonight. You've done so much for me, and I just want you to enjoy this with me. I'm trying. I really am. I paused, searching for the right words. "I just wish they could see me for who I am. Not just the doctor, but me." She nodded, understanding flooding her features. "You're amazing, Helena. You've helped so many people. Brian wouldn't be here without you. They should be proud. Sometimes I wonder if they even know what I do," I admitted, leaning against the railing. To them, it's always about traditional milestones. The job, the marriage, the kids. But I'm not living my life for them. "Exactly. You're living it for you," she insisted. "And that's what matters." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she was right. Perhaps it was time to stop seeking validation from my parents and focus on what brought me joy. As I looked back inside, I spotted my parents across the room, sitting at a table, their expressions strained. I could tell they were discussing me again. I straightened my back, suddenly filled with determination. "Hey, I'm gonna go back inside," I said, straightening my dress. "I want to celebrate with you." "Okay, let's do it," Emily cheered, and together we made our way back into the lively atmosphere. As we rejoined the party, the energy was infectious. I let the music wash over me and tried to shake off the lingering shadows of my parents' expectations. I danced with Emily, with Brian, and even with some of their friends. Laughter bubbled up inside me, and the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. As the night progressed, I began to embrace every moment, every connection, and even the chaos of it all. But then, as the clock inched closer to midnight, I caught sight of my parents again. They were standing near the bar, and I could see my dad gesturing animatedly, his face flushed with frustration. I steeled myself, knowing that I couldn't avoid the inevitable conversation any longer. I approached them, my heart racing. "Hey, Mom, Dad," I said, forcing a smile. "Helena," my dad replied, his tone lacking warmth. "We were just talking about you." "Oh, what about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just how you've chosen a rather unconventional path in life," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "It's a bit disappointing, don't you think?" I felt a wave of frustration wash over me, but I took a deep breath. "What's disappointing is that you don't seem to see the value in what I do. I save lives, Dad. Isn't that more important than meeting your expectations?" My mother interjected, her voice rising. "We just want what's best for you. You could have a family, a stable career." "And I do have a career," I shot back, my emotions bubbling to the surface. "One that I love. Why is that not enough?" The tension hung thick in the air, but before any more words could be exchanged, Brian approached, a wide smile on his face, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Dr. Helena, can I steal you for a moment?" I turned to him, grateful for the distraction. "Of course, Brian. What's up? Can we take a picture?" "I want to capture this moment with the person who saved my life," he said, his sincerity radiating. In that instant, my parents faded into the background, and I found myself smiling genuinely again. I nodded and stepped aside with Brian, ready to embrace the joy of the moment, ready to let the night remind me of my worth. regardless of the voices that sought to diminish it. As I stood there, shoulder to shoulder with Brian, I felt a rush of warmth spread through me. It was like a balm over the wounds my parents had just opened. The camera clicked, capturing not just our smiles, but the unspoken bond of gratitude and respect that filled the space between us. This was why I chose this path, why I spent countless nights studying, pushing through the fatigue to be the doctor I wanted to be. Brian's life was a testament to that choice, a reminder of why I had fought so hard against the tide of doubt from my family. "Thank you, really," Brian said, lowering the camera and looking into my eyes. "You have no idea how much it means to me to be here today." "Honestly, it means a lot to me too," I replied, my voice softening. "You're a walking miracle, and I'm just glad I could be a part of your journey." He grinned, the joy in his expression contagious. "Well, you've certainly made this day unforgettable." As we returned to the reception, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The vibrant sounds of laughter, music, and clinking glasses enveloped me. The dance floor was alive with people swaying to the beat, and I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. My sister had worked so hard to create this magical day, and I wanted to honor that by letting go of the negativity that had briefly clouded my mind. In moments like these, I always found my sister to be a guiding light. Amelia had a way of pulling people together, of making everyone feel included. She was the type who could light up a room with her laughter and draw out the shyest of guests. I scanned the crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but my heart sank slightly when I saw her deep in conversation with a group of friends, her happiness radiating like a sunbeam. I decided to grab a drink and let myself unwind for a moment. I walked over to the bar, the cool marble surface grounding me. As I ordered a sparkling water with a twist of lime, I could hear the chatter of guests around me, stories and memories shared over the clinking of glasses. It was a comforting cacophony, a reminder that life was happening all around me, and I was a part of it. As I took a sip, I felt a presence beside me. I turned to find one of the groomsmen, a tall guy with tousled hair and a charming smile. "Hey there, Dr. Helena," he said, his tone friendly and warm. "I've heard a lot about you." "Really? All good things, I hope," I replied, a playful smile creeping onto my face. "Oh, definitely," he laughed. "Brian has been raving about how you saved his life. You've got quite the reputation among our circle." His enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt a swell of pride. "I appreciate that. It was a team effort, really," I said, shrugging slightly. "But I'm glad to hear he's doing well." "Doing well is an understatement," he said, leaning against the bar. "He's thriving, and we're all grateful to you for that." Before I could respond, a burst of laughter erupted from the dance floor, drawing my attention. I turned to see my sister twirling around, her white gown flowing like waves as she danced with her new husband. They looked so in love, so blissfully happy that it made my heart swell. I felt a tug of emotion, a mix of pride and affection, knowing that she had found someone who cherished her as she deserved. "Are you going to join them on the dance floor?" the groomsman asked, breaking my moment of reverie. I hesitated, glancing at the bustling dance floor where couples were moving in sync with the music. "I don't know, I'm not the best dancer," I admitted, a hint of insecurity creeping in. "Come on, just have fun," he encouraged, nudging my shoulder playfully. "It's a wedding. Let loose a little." His enthusiasm was infectious, and before I knew it, I found myself laughing. "All right, you've convinced me. Let's go." We made our way to the dance floor, and I allowed myself to get swept up in the moment. The music pulsed through my veins, and I moved to the rhythm, feeling lighter with each step. It was freeing, the combination of laughter and movement, the joy of celebrating love and life. I caught glimpses of familiar faces, friends, family, all lost in their own moments of happiness. As I danced, I noticed Brian watching from the sidelines, a proud smile on his face. I couldn't help but return the smile, feeling a sense of connection, not just to him, but to everyone around me. The night was unfolding beautifully, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I allowed myself to just be. But as I twirled and laughed, I couldn't shake the echoes of my parents' disapproval from my mind completely. They were still there, lurking in the corners of my thoughts, reminding me of their expectations. Yet, amid the joy, I started to realize that this was my journey, my life, and I didn't have to conform to anyone else's vision of success. After several songs, I stepped off the dance floor, breathless and exhilarated. I grabbed another drink, this time a glass of champagne, feeling a little bold. I looked around, soaking in the love and celebration that enveloped the room. I spotted Amelia again, her face flushed with happiness as she and her husband shared a sweet moment together, completely lost in each other. It made me think about what I truly wanted for my own life. Was it a family, a stable career, or was it something more? What did happiness look like for me? The questions loomed large, but for now, I was content to celebrate my sister's big day, to embrace the love surrounding me, and to find joy in the moments that made life beautiful. It was a reminder that life wasn't about pleasing others, but about finding my own path, no matter how winding it might be. As I stood there, drink in hand, the warmth of the celebration wrapping around me like a cozy blanket, I couldn't help but reflect on the love that filled the room. It was infectious, and I felt a tingle of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could carve out my own version of happiness too. I watched as my family mingled, and for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to imagine a life where my parents weren't so quick to judge, where their approval wasn't the yardstick by which I measured my worth. Then, I spotted someone I hadn't expected to see. In the corner of the room, leaning against the wall with a drink in his hand, was Ethan, Amelia's husband's brother. I remembered him from the engagement party, the tall guy with messy hair and a kind smile. He had a way of making people feel at ease. And as I watched him, I wondered if he felt the same energy in the room that I did. Did he sense the love, the joy, or was he just here to support his brother? Curiosity got the best of me, and I made my way over to him. "Hey, Ethan," I said, trying to sound casual, though I could feel the flutter of nervousness in my stomach. "How's the party treating you?" He looked up, surprised, and then smiled. "Hey, Helena, it's amazing. It's nice to see everyone so happy. How about you? Enjoying the wedding?" "I am," I replied, taking a sip of my champagne. It's hard not to get swept up in it, right? My sister looks stunning. She really does. You know, I've heard so much about you. Amelia talks about you all the time. My heart warmed at that. Oh, really? All good things, I hope. Absolutely. She admires your dedication to your work. It's inspiring. His words surprised me. I had always felt like my career was a source of tension with my family, but here was a stranger who appreciated it. Thanks. That means a lot. I've been working hard, trying to find my footing in a world that often feels overwhelming. Yeah, I get that. I'm in med school, and some days, it feels like I'm drowning in textbooks and lectures. But I love it. We shared a laugh, and for a moment, I felt a connection with him, a kindred spirit navigating the same turbulent waters. "What's your specialty?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Not sure yet. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm leaning towards pediatrics. I think I'd like working with kids." "Wow, that's amazing. They must love you." "Thanks. I hope so. It's a long road ahead though." As we spoke, I could feel the weight of my parents' expectations start to lift. Even if just slightly, I was in a space where someone appreciated my passion and drive, and it felt liberating. We exchanged stories about our experiences, and I couldn't help but notice how easy it was to talk to him. Eventually though, the music changed. and a slow song filled the room. I looked around, watching couples sway together, lost in their own worlds. My gaze drifted back to Ethan, who seemed lost in thought. "Do you dance?" I asked, half joking. "I mean, I can try," he replied with a chuckle. "Okay, let's do it then," I said, surprising even myself with my spontaneous spirit. We made our way to the dance floor, and as we started to move to the rhythm, I felt lighter. It was just the two of us, the world outside fading away. I could feel the warmth of his hand on my back as we swayed, and for the first time that evening, I let go of the nagging doubts that usually clung to me. As the song played on, I caught a glimpse of my parents across the room. They were chatting with some relatives, but their eyes flickered over to me and Ethan. I could sense their judgment, but this time, I didn't let it dampen my mood. I was having fun, and it felt good to step outside of their shadows. Even for a brief moment, after the song ended, Ethan and I took a breather, stepping off the dance floor to grab drinks. "You're a good dancer," I said, playfully nudging him with my elbow. "Thanks. You're not so bad yourself," he replied, a grin on his face. "So, Helena, what do you do when you're not saving lives?" I laughed, unsure whether to take his comments seriously. "I'm a doctor, yes, but saving lives feels a bit dramatic," I said. "I work in family medicine mostly. It can be rewarding, but it's also a lot of work." He nodded, genuinely interested. "That's amazing. You must have some incredible stories." I thought about it for a moment. Definitely some wild ones. It's a privilege to help people, but it can be exhausting. Sometimes I wonder if I'm cut out for it. "Of course you are. If you weren't, you wouldn't be doing it," he said with conviction. I appreciated his words, feeling a spark of encouragement that had been missing for so long. As we chatted, I noticed Amelia weaving her way through the crowd toward us, her face radiant. "Helena, Ethan, there you are." She looked so happy, and I felt a rush of affection for my sister. "What's up?" I asked, smiling at her. "Just wanted to make sure you two are having a good time. And Helena, you look amazing out there on the dance floor." "Thanks. Ethan was a great partner," I replied, nudging him playfully. She turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "You've got to show her your moves too. You're not just a bookworm, right?" Ethan chuckled, clearly flattered by the attention. "I'll do my best." Amelia clapped her hands together. "Perfect. I'll let you two get back to it. I'm so glad to see you both enjoying the night. Don't forget to take plenty of pictures." As she walked away, I realized just how much I appreciated her enthusiasm. It reminded me that love and support could be found in unexpected places. Even if my parents weren't the ones providing it, with Ethan by my side, I felt more confident, ready to face the world on my own terms. The night wore on, laughter and music swirling around us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I might not have all the answers, and my parents might still have their expectations, but I was learning to embrace my own path, one dance step at a time. As the dance floor pulsed beneath our feet, I felt a sense of liberation that I hadn't experienced in years. The music wrapped around us like a warm embrace, and every beat seemed to synchronize with my heart, igniting a fire within me that had long been flickering. I glanced at Ethan, who was caught up in the rhythm, his laughter bright and infectious. It was in that moment, surrounded by friends and the vibrant atmosphere, that I realized how much I had been holding back. With each spin and sway, I let go of the weight of my parents' expectations. The rigid outlines of what I was supposed to be began to blur, and I found myself enjoying simply being me. The carefree atmosphere of the party allowed me to shed my past, even if just for a night. I leaned into Ethan's shoulder, our laughter mingling with the music, and I felt a spark of something more than friendship igniting between us. "Dance like nobody's watching, right?" I said playfully, nudging him as I twirled away, feeling the freedom coursing through my veins. He followed suit, trying to match my energy, and the way he danced, awkward but endearing, made me laugh even harder. We shared stories between songs, bonding over our favorite movies and the books that had shaped us. I learned that he loved classic literature, and I couldn't help but tease him about being a bookworm. Yet I admired his passion. It was refreshing to meet someone who valued intellect, but also knew how to let loose. "All right, I've got a question for you," he said, catching his breath. "If you could live in any fictional world, where would it be?" That was a tough one. I thought for a moment, imagining the lush landscapes of my favorite novels. Probably Hogwarts. I mean, who wouldn't want to learn magic? He nodded, a sparkle in his eye. Good choice. I'd pick Middle-earth. Imagine the adventures. As the night went on, I noticed Amelia moving through the crowd, snapping candid photos of everyone. She seemed to embody joy itself, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for her presence. Just when I thought the night couldn't get better, she appeared beside us, her camera poised. "Say cheese," she chirped, and we both turned to face the lens, grinning widely. I felt a rush of happiness, the kind that comes from being fully present in a moment, surrounded by people who genuinely cared. "Let's get a few more," Amelia declared as she ushered us into different poses. I felt a little silly, but also incredibly alive, as if I had stepped outside of my own worries. After a couple of rounds with the camera, we took a break, and I could see Ethan's cheeks flushed from dancing and laughter. "This is the most fun I've had in ages," he admitted, and I could feel my heart flutter at his words. Me too. I've been so caught up in trying to please everyone else that I forgot how to just enjoy life, I confessed, my voice softer now as I considered my journey. Do you ever feel that way? Like the weight of the world is just pressing down on you? Absolutely, he said, leaning closer, the atmosphere shifting slightly. But moments like this remind me that it's okay to step away from that pressure. It's important to carve out your own happiness, even if it's just for a night. His words resonated deeply with me. I had spent so much time worrying about my parents and their expectations that I had neglected my own desires and ambitions. I had to focus on what made me happy, not just what was expected of me. As the night began to wind down, I caught sight of the clock. The realization hit me hard. This magical evening was coming to an end. I looked around, soaking in the laughter and joy, trying to memorize every detail. I didn't want to forget this feeling of freedom and acceptance. "Hey, can I ask you something?" I turned to Ethan, my heart racing a little. "What do you think is the key to staying true to yourself in the face of pressure?" He paused, contemplating my question. "I think it's about finding your own voice. It's so easy to get lost in what others want for you, but at the end of the day, you have to live with your own choices. Surround yourself with people who support you, like we have tonight, and don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in." I nodded, feeling inspired by his perspective. It was a reminder I desperately needed, one that echoed the journey I was on. The night had become more than just a celebration. It was a turning point for me, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos of my life. As we gathered our things to leave, I couldn't help but steal glances at Ethan. He was more than just a friend. He was becoming a confidant, someone who understood the struggles I faced without judgment. I felt an undeniable connection, one that I hoped would continue to grow as we navigated this complicated world together. Walking out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the evening settle in my heart. This wasn't just about the fun we had. It was about what I had learned, about myself, about friendship, and about the importance of embracing my own identity. As we stepped away from the party, I felt a sense of hope blossoming inside me, and I knew I wanted to carry this feeling forward. What about you? Have you ever had a night that changed your perspective? Let me know in the comments below. The next day, I woke up with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety swirling in my chest. The wedding had been beautiful, but the aftermath was still lingering in my mind, like the remnants of a dream that I couldn't quite shake off. I could hear my parents' laughter from the previous night, their playful jabs directed at my life choices echoing in my ears. It was the kind of laughter that was supposed to feel warm, but instead, it felt like a reminder of all the ways I felt like I was falling short. I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the positive energy Ethan had brought into my life. After all, I had been working so hard to find my footing in the medical field, and here I was, getting sidetracked by some offhand comments from my family. I needed to remind myself that my journey was valid, that the choices I made were mine alone to navigate. As I got ready for the day, I thought about my sister and her new husband. They were embarking on a new chapter, while I felt like I was still searching for my own plotline. I picked out a simple outfit, something comfortable yet professional, and decided to head to the hospital. I needed to immerse myself in my work, in the world where I felt most at home. Driving through the familiar streets, I noticed the little things that used to bring me joy. The quaint coffee shop I used to frequent, the park where I spent hours studying. It was a reminder of who I was before all the noise began to drown out my passion for medicine. Arriving at the hospital, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. The moment I walked through the doors, the bustle of the emergency department enveloped me. I was greeted by the hum of activity, the sounds of nurses and doctors working together, and the occasional beep of machines that indicated life was both fragile and resilient. This was where I felt empowered, where my knowledge and skills could truly make a difference. As the day unfolded, I moved through my tasks with a newfound vigor. I had a few patient consultations scheduled, and I found myself genuinely excited to meet them. My first patient was a young woman who had been experiencing debilitating headaches. Listening to her story and gathering her symptoms, I felt a connection forming, something that reminded me why I wanted to become a doctor in the first place. It wasn't just about treating ailments. It was about understanding people and their experiences. After our session, I walked back to the nurse's station, still buzzing from the interaction. I spotted Ethan, who was making his rounds in the same department. He caught my eye and smiled, and I felt a flutter of warmth in my chest. We exchanged a few words, and I could see the passion in his eyes as he spoke about his patients. It was infectious, and I found myself wanting to share more of my day with him. During our break, we sat together in the small cafeteria, the smell of coffee and baked goods filling the air. I couldn't help but share my experience with the young woman and how invigorating it felt to connect with her. Ethan listened intently, nodding along, and it was clear that he understood the joy I felt in these moments. "You know," he said, leaning in slightly, "that's why I love this field. It's not just about saving lives. It's about making an impact in the lives of those we care for." His words resonated deeply with me, and I realized that this was the kind of conversation I had been craving. I had spent so much time feeling isolated in my journey, but here was someone who truly understood the weight of our responsibilities and the rewards that came with them. As we talked, I caught a glimpse of the clock on the wall. Time had flown by, and I needed to get back to my patients. I felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of leaving our conversation, but I was also filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. I found myself engaged with every patient, every interaction, each one reminding me of why I chose this path. The laughter and camaraderie with my colleagues felt richer, the long hours more bearable. I was finding my rhythm again, and I felt grateful for the perspective shift Ethan had sparked in me. As I wrapped up my shift, I noticed the sun beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the city. I took a moment to breathe deeply, feeling a sense of gratitude for the work I had done and the lives I had touched, even in small ways. Driving home, I reflected on the day. My parents' mocking comments from the wedding seemed distant, like echoes of a past I was learning to let go of. I didn't have to fit into their mold or meet their expectations. My journey was my own, and I was finally starting to embrace that. When I got home, I found myself scrolling through my phone, and as I did, I stumbled upon a message from my sister. She wanted to know how my day went and if I was excited for her and her husband's honeymoon. I smiled, typing out a quick response, sharing snippets of my day and the patients I had connected with. I realized in that moment that despite the complexities of family dynamics, there was still love there. My sister was supportive in her own way, and I knew deep down that she wanted the best for me, just as I wanted the best for her. As I settled into bed that night, I reflected on the connections I had made throughout the day, both with patients and with Ethan. I was beginning to feel like I was carving out a space for myself in this world, one where my voice mattered and my choices were valid. The journey was far from over, but I was learning to embrace the bumps along the way. I had a purpose, and with every day, I was becoming more of the person I wanted to be. The next morning, I woke up to a bright sun filtering through my curtains, casting warm patterns on the walls. I stretched, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety as I remembered the events of the wedding. My sister's new life was beginning, and I couldn't help but think of my own journey, still unfolding. I took a deep breath and decided to keep moving forward, embracing whatever the day had in store. I brewed a cup of coffee, letting the familiar aroma wrap around me like a warm blanket. Sitting on my balcony, I gazed out at the world waking up around me. The birds were chirping, and I could hear the distant sound of children laughing. It was a stark contrast to the heavy emotions I'd felt the night before. Today, I would visit my patients again, and I found comfort in that routine. There was something grounding about connecting with people who were facing their own battles. As I made my way to the hospital, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. I was entering a space where I could make a difference, even if it was just a small one. The familiar scent of antiseptic greeted me as I walked through the doors, and I instantly felt at home. I made my rounds, checking in on patients, listening to their stories, and providing care. One patient, Mrs. Thompson, had been struggling with chronic pain and was often withdrawn. But today, something seemed different. As I approached her room, I noticed a glimmer of light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Dr. Helena," she said with a faint smile, "I've been working on my breathing exercises, like you suggested." I beamed at her. "That's wonderful to hear, Mrs. Thompson. How have you been feeling?" She began to share her progress, the small victories she had achieved over the last few days. It wasn't just about the exercises. It was about finding hope again. I felt a surge of joy as she spoke, reminding me why I had chosen this path. It was moments like these that fueled my passion. After my shift, I met up with my friend Mia for dinner. We sat at our favorite little cafe, catching up on life and sharing a few laughs. I told her about my sister's wedding and how the night had taken an unexpected turn. Mia listened intently, nodding along as I recounted the awkwardness of my parents' comments and Ethan's surprising revelation. "That must have been such a strange moment for you," she said, her eyes wide. "It really was. I mean, I never expected him to say something like that in front of everyone. It made me rethink how I see myself and my career." Mia sipped her drink thoughtfully. "You've always been passionate about your work. Maybe this is a sign that you're on the right path. Sometimes it takes an outsider to remind us of our worth." Her words resonated with me. I had spent so much time seeking validation from my family that I had almost forgotten to appreciate the impact I was making in my own right. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting more on the wedding and Ethan's words. I decided to reach out to him. I sent a message, thanking him for his kind words and asking if he'd be open to sharing more about his experience. I wasn't sure why I felt compelled to do this. Perhaps it was the desire to connect with someone who had seen me for who I was, rather than who my family expected me to be. To my surprise, he replied almost immediately, "I'd love to chat, Helena. Your work is truly inspiring." We set up a time to meet for coffee, and I felt a mix of anticipation and nerves. What could I learn from him? As the day approached, I found myself thinking about our conversation more and more. What if he saw something in me that I hadn't recognized yet? When the day finally arrived, I walked into the cafe, feeling slightly anxious. I spotted Ethan at a small table, looking relaxed and engaged as he scrolled through his phone. When he noticed me, he smiled warmly and stood to greet me. "Hi, Helena. I'm glad we could meet up," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Thanks for inviting me," I replied, trying to shake off my nerves. As we settled into conversation, I learned more about him, his background, his experiences, and how he had been affected by a health scare that had led him to seek help. He talked about the importance of compassion in healthcare, and I found myself captivated by his insights. "I honestly don't think I'd be here today without doctors like you," he said, his tone sincere. "It's incredible how much of a difference you make in people's lives." His words struck a chord deep within me. It was one thing to hear praise from my colleagues, but coming from someone who had been on the receiving end of care, it felt different, more profound. I realized how important it was to embrace my role, to acknowledge that I was indeed making a difference. We shared stories, laughter, and a few moments of silence as we sipped our drinks. I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Sometimes it took a conversation with a stranger to remind you of your own strengths. As we wrapped up our meeting, I felt a sense of connection that I hadn't anticipated. I left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose, grateful for the unexpected turn my life had taken. I was starting to understand that it was okay to carve out my own space, to pursue my passions, and to let go of the weight of others' expectations. The journey wasn't always easy, but moments like these reminded me that I was on the right path, one step at a time. As I stepped outside the cafe, the sun seemed to shine a little brighter. I took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill my lungs, and felt the weight on my shoulders begin to lift. I was ready to embrace the challenges ahead, but first, I had to navigate the upcoming family wedding, a celebration that had become a complicated tapestry of emotions for me. My sister's wedding was only a few days away, and the thought of facing my parents again filled me with trepidation. I had spent years trying to earn their approval, trying to fit into their mold of success and happiness. But now, armed with the reminder of my own worth, I felt a little more resilient. Still, the scars of their dismissive comments lingered in my mind, like unwelcome guests at a party I couldn't escape. Would I be able to face them without crumbling under their expectations? The day of the wedding arrived, and I dressed carefully, choosing a gown that made me feel confident and beautiful. It was a deep emerald green, a color that I knew would stand out among the sea of pastels, often favored at weddings. As I looked in the mirror, I reminded myself that I deserved to be there, just as much as anyone else. Arriving at the venue, I was immediately struck by the sheer beauty of it. The floral arrangements were breathtaking, and the sound of laughter and chatter filled the air like a warm embrace. I spotted my sister, radiant in her wedding dress, surrounded by friends and family. My heart swelled with pride for her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the familiar knot in my stomach as I caught sight of my parents. As I navigated through the crowd, I could feel their gaze on me, measuring, assessing. My mother's smile was wide, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the same smile I had seen so many times when I was being scrutinized, a smile that felt more like a mask than a sign of genuine warmth. I took a deep breath, channeling the strength I had found in my recent interactions. I was not going to let their perceptions define me anymore. The ceremony began, and I watched my sister walk down the aisle with tears in my eyes. It was a moment filled with joy, love, and an overwhelming sense of family. I could see how happy she was, and that brought me comfort. For her, this day was perfect. Yet as the vows were exchanged, I felt the familiar pang of insecurity creeping in. What would they say about me later? Would they compare my life to hers, as they so often did? I shook my head, trying to dispel those thoughts. This was not my day, it was hers. I wanted to be present, to celebrate her happiness without letting my insecurities taint the moment. As the evening progressed, I immersed myself in conversations with relatives and friends, laughing and reminiscing about old times. Yet, I was ever aware of my parents' whispers from across the room, a reminder of the judgment that loomed. As dinner was served, I found myself seated at a table with some distant relatives. They were lovely, sharing stories about their lives and careers, and for a moment, I felt at ease. But then, my father's voice cut through the laughter, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Helena, how is your practice going? Still working those long hours for little recognition?" The table fell silent, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. It was as if time had stopped, and all eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. I could sense my mother's discomfort, but my father's tone was sharp, laden with the same dismissiveness that had haunted me for years. I felt the old familiar urge to deflect, to brush it off with a joke, but something inside me snapped. "Actually, Dad," I began, my voice steady but firm, "I've recently had a breakthrough with my patience. I'm learning to appreciate the small victories, and it feels pretty incredible." I could see my mother's eyes widen, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. The table was now filled with a mix of admiration and curiosity. My father opened his mouth to retort, but I pressed on. "It's not always about the recognition, you know. Sometimes, it's about the impact we have on people's lives. I had a patient recently who said I saved his life. Moments like that remind me why I chose this path." The table erupted in applause, and I felt the warmth of support wash over me. My heart raced, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of pride in my work, in who I had become. It was liberating to stand up for myself, to share my truth, and to see the validation in the eyes of those around me. But even as I savored that victory, I knew this was just the beginning. The evening continued, and I made it a point to stay connected with my sister, who was glowing with happiness. I could feel her joy radiating, and it was contagious. We danced, laughed, and made memories that I would cherish for years to come. Yet, the lingering presence of my parents and their expectations remained like a shadow. The night was magical, but I also knew that the battle for self-acceptance was far from over. How could I reconcile my newfound confidence with their opinions? And how much longer would I let their voices dictate how I felt about myself? As the evening wound down, I caught my sister's eye, and she smiled at me, a knowing look that spoke volumes. In that moment, I realized that family could be complicated, but it could also be a source of strength. I was determined to continue this journey of self-discovery, to embrace my identity, and to find my voice amidst the noise. The night air was cool, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the ballroom where we had just celebrated. I could still hear the laughter and music drifting into the night, but inside, I felt a strange mix of elation and apprehension. I watched as my sister and her new husband shared a moment, lost in their own world, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. They had this beautiful, unshakable bond, a partnership built on love and support. I wondered if I would ever find that kind of connection. Would I ever feel completely accepted for who I was? without reservations or judgments. As I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, I noticed a few guests gathered in a circle, their voices low but animated. My curiosity piqued. I approached them just in time to catch the tail end of a conversation about the wedding, and surprisingly, my profession. It felt strange to overhear snippets of admiration about me. The brilliant doctor, as they put it. I couldn't help but smile. It reminded me that not everyone saw me through the lens of my parents' expectations. But just as quickly, the joy was squashed when I spotted my parents across the courtyard. They were engaged in another of their whispered debates, clearly unaware of how their words traveled. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach tighten. I wanted to believe that my recent courage could withstand whatever they might say, but I also knew that old habits die hard. "Do you think she'll ever settle down?" my mother asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Honestly, I doubt it. She's too focused on her career," my father replied. For a moment, I wanted to confront them, to tell them that my life was not a checklist of their expectations. Instead, I chose silence, allowing their words to wash over me like a wave. I was not the little girl they once knew, and I refused to let their opinions dictate my worth any longer. I decided to take a moment for myself, stepping away from the crowd to gather my thoughts. I leaned against the cool stone of the building, staring at the stars, twinkling in the vast night sky, and tried to ground myself. My sister's happiness was a beacon, reminding me that love could exist even in a complicated family dynamic. As I closed my eyes, I could hear the laughter of the guests behind me, the clinking of glasses, and the distant strains of the music. It felt like a world away from the heaviness of my thoughts. Just then, I felt a light touch on my shoulder. I turned to see my sister, her face illuminated with joy. "Hey you, what's going on?" she asked, concern mingling with her happiness. "Just taking a breather," I replied, forcing a smile. "Is everything okay?" she pressed, knowing me all too well. "Yeah, I guess I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed," I admitted. "It's a lot, you know. Seeing everyone so happy while I'm still figuring things out for myself." She nodded, her expression softening. "I get it. But you're doing amazing, Helena. You have so much to be proud of. Remember, it's okay to carve your own path." Her words felt like a warm hug, wrapping around the doubts that had been creeping in. I realized she was right. I was on a journey, and it was mine to navigate. I didn't have to conform to what others expected of me, especially not my parents. As we stood there, taking in the moment, I felt the weight of my insecurities begin to lift. The evening was about love, laughter, and celebration, not judgment. I resolved to focus on my sister's joy, to celebrate her new beginning, without the shadow of my parents hanging over me. We re-entered the ballroom hand in hand, and the atmosphere was electric. The dance floor was alive, and I felt a surge of energy as the beat pulsed through the room. We joined our friends, letting the music wash over us. I danced like nobody was watching, feeling liberated and alive. Later in the evening, as the celebration reached its peak, I noticed a figure standing off to the side, quietly observing the festivities. It was her groom, a tall man with kind eyes. He had been a source of intrigue for me throughout the night, and I watched as he took a moment away from the crowd. I decided to join him, curious about what he might think of the celebration. "Enjoying the party?" I asked, trying to break the ice. He turned, a smile breaking across his face. "Absolutely. It's a beautiful night, and your sister is incredible." There was a sincerity in his voice that made me relax. "She really is. I'm so happy for her," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. He hesitated for a moment, then seemed to gather his thoughts. "You know, I've heard so much about you. Your sister talks about you all the time, about your work as a doctor. It's truly inspiring." My cheeks flushed at the compliment. "Thank you. I love what I do, even if it can be challenging. His expression shifted, and I noticed a depth in his gaze. Helena, I don't know if you remember me, but you saved my life. Those words struck me like a lightning bolt. My mind raced back to a time when I had treated a patient with a severe condition, a life-or-death situation where every second counted. Wait, are you? He nodded. Yes, I was that patient. You were my doctor during a really tough time. I don't think I ever got to thank you properly. I was stunned, the pieces falling into place. His gratitude was overwhelming, and for the first time that night, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. It was a reminder of why I had chosen my path, why I had fought so hard for my place in the world. As we talked, I realized that moments like these, the impact of my work, the connections I made, were what truly mattered. They outweighed any judgment my parents could cast. I could forge my path, not just for myself, but for those I was meant to help. The evening faded into a blur of laughter and music, but I knew deep down that this was a turning point. I was ready to embrace who I was meant to be, regardless of anyone else's expectations. As the night wore on, the music pulsed around us, but my heart was beating to a different rhythm, one filled with hope and clarity. The conversation with the man who had been my patient, his gratitude still lingering in the air, felt like a cosmic nudge, reminding me that every sacrifice I had made, every late night and early morning had led me to that moment. It was like the universe was telling me, you're on the right path. Reflecting on my journey, I recalled the years of grueling studies, the sleepless nights in medical school, the long shifts that seemed to stretch indefinitely. I had often found myself questioning whether it was all worth it. Was I doing the right thing? Was I truly meant to be a doctor? There were times when the weight of my parents' expectations felt like a heavy backpack I was forced to carry up a never-ending hill. Their dreams for me had become a shadow that loomed over my aspirations. But in that moment, surrounded by new friends and old memories, I realized something profound. I wasn't just a doctor. I was a lifeline for people like him. I had the power to change lives, to make a difference, and to offer hope when it seemed like there was none. This man was living proof that my hard work paid off, that my purpose was larger than my own doubts and fears. As we shared stories and laughter, I felt a sense of community that I hadn't experienced in a long time. The walls that had surrounded me for so long began to crumble. I knew that I wasn't alone in this. There were so many others out there, fighting their own battles, striving to follow their passions. It made me wonder, how many of us are out there, feeling lost and unsure, yet carrying the potential to create something beautiful in the world? If you're one of those people, I'd love to hear your story. What's holding you back? Let me know below. The party eventually began to dwindle, but my mind was still racing. I looked around at the faces of my friends, people who had supported me through thick and thin. They saw me for who I truly was, not just a doctor, but a woman full of dreams, aspirations, and flaws. I remembered all the moments when I had doubted myself, the times I felt like giving up. Those moments didn't define me. They were stepping stones to something greater. As we hugged goodbye, I felt a surge of gratitude. My heart swelled at the thought of how far I had come. The journey had been messy, filled with potholes and detours, but it was mine. I realized that it was okay to let go of the expectations that weren't mine to carry. I could create my own narrative, one where I prioritized my happiness and well-being. In the following days, I took a deep breath and reached out to my parents. I knew the conversation would be difficult, but I was ready to stand my ground. I explained my path, the reasons behind my choices, and how I had found purpose in my work. To my surprise, their reaction was not what I expected. They listened. They asked questions. They were curious about my experiences, my struggles, and my victories. It was a turning point for us. Slowly but surely, I could feel the walls between us begin to dissolve. I had spent so long fearing their disappointment that I hadn't considered their capacity for understanding. That conversation opened the door for a new kind of relationship, one built on respect and mutual appreciation. It was liberating. I could finally breathe without feeling suffocated by the weight of unrealistic expectations. I wasn't just their daughter. I was a person with my own dreams and desires. As I moved forward in my career, I carried the lessons I learned from that night. Every patient I treated became a reminder of why I chose this path. I no longer felt the need to prove myself to anyone but me. I embraced the challenges and the failures, knowing they were part of the journey. Each day became an opportunity to show up, not just as a doctor, but as a person who cared deeply for others. Looking back, I realized that the story we tell ourselves often shapes our reality. I had spent years crafting a narrative steeped in fear and uncertainty, but as I stepped into the light of my truth, I could see the beauty in vulnerability. I could share my struggles and triumphs with others, knowing that perhaps my story could inspire someone else to embrace their journey too. As I reflect on everything that has brought me to this moment, I feel immense gratitude. Life has a way of guiding us, even when we can't see it. And now, as I stand on the brink of new adventures, I ask you this: what dreams have you been putting off because of fear or doubt? Are you ready to chase them? Let me know below. This journey isn't just mine. It's a collective experience we all share. Together, we can rise, breaking free from the constraints that hold us back. I'm here to embrace my story, and I hope you'll join me in embracing yours. After all, we all have the power to shape our destinies. Let's step into the light together